Welcome to the deep dive. If you're looking for a way to get informed quickly, well, you're definitely in the right place.
Uh-huh.
Today, we're diving into a really fascinating stack of source material. It's all focused on a part of society that's, massively shaped history, but often gets, well, missed in the usual textbooks. We're talking about the world's pastoralists.
That's right. And when we say pastoralists, we mean huge numbers of people globally, over 22 million just in Africa.
Right.
And their defining feature, it's simple, but so important. They move. They move around to make their living.
Right. Moving is key.
Exactly. So our goal today is to kind of dig into this, go beyond just footnotes, and pull out the really surprising, crucial knowledge about these nomadic groups, especially in India and Africa.
We want to understand not just what they did, but maybe why their way of life, this ancient survival model, is actually being seen now as, well, a vital lesson for today's world.
Precisely. Especially in terms of ecological sustainability.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where should we start? Maybe high up in India, the Himalayas?
Perfect place to start. The sheer majesty of the setting, it's incredible. And the rhythm of life for the nomadic communities there, it's deeply sophisticated. It's all tuned to the seasons.
It sounds like an amazing story of just adapting to the environment.
It really is. So take the Gujar Bakarwals, for instance. They're in Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay.
They mainly herd goats and sheep. And their movement, it's not just wandering, it's this huge coordinated migration. They travel together, like multiple households, in what they call a kafila.
A kafila.
Yeah, heading up into the high mountains when summer comes.
And what are they heading towards up there? I saw a term in the sources, bugyals. What exactly are those?
The bugyals.
Yeah.
They're absolutely essential for them. Think vast natural meadows, pastures way up high in the mountains, often above 12,000 feet.
Huh?
They become lush and green in the summer, just when the lower valleys get too hot and dry. I mean, just picturing it, hundreds of people, thousands of animals making this journey together. It's incredible, but very purposeful.
It can't just be about finding food, though, can it? I mean, if they just stayed put, wouldn't they strip the land bare?
That's the really clever part. Their constant movement, it's a kind of ecological intelligence baked right in.
How so?
Well, it's basically environmental management, and risk management, too. By always moving using lower pastures in winter, the high bugyals in summer, they give the land time to recover.
Okay. So they don't overuse any one spot.
Exactly. It prevents that overuse, stops the grazing grounds from deteriorating. Their whole way of life is structured around letting the environment regenerate.
That kind of ecological wisdom, does it look different elsewhere in India? Say, if we move away from the mountains, maybe towards Maharashtra. You mentioned the Dangars there.
Yes, the Dangars,
Yeah.
a very important community on the Central Plateau. Traditionally, they were shepherds, but also skilled blanket weavers. And they herded buffalo, too.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating is their migration pattern creates this perfect symbiotic relationship with the settled farmers in the Konkan region. It's totally decentralized.
Symbiotic. So they're moving on to farmland. Why would the farmers, the Konkani peasants, be okay with thousands of animals on their fields? What's the deal?
It's all about mutual benefit. Pure trust, really. See, by October, the plateau where the Dungars usually are gets very dry.
Right.
So they move their herds down toward the Konkan coast. And the timing is specific. It's right after the Kharif harvest, the main monsoon crop. The Dungar animals get to feed on the leftover stubble in the fields. And in return, their manure provides rich, natural fertilizer for the peasants' next crop.
So food for the animals, fertilizer for the fields. A perfect exchange.
Exactly. A completely restorative cycle. And it all happens outside formal markets. It's just an understood arrangement.
Amazing. And we should probably quickly touch on other groups too, right? Like in the drier parts.
Definitely. In Rajasthan, for example, you have the Maru Raikas. Maru means desert. And they primarily herded camels, perfect for that climate. Their temporary settlements even have a name, Atandi.
Patendi, okay.
And then you have groups like the Banjars. They were the real long-distance movers, almost like trade facilitators, moving across states, selling plow cattle, trading them for grain and fodder, real connectors.
So the big picture from India is this incredible diversity, these specialized systems, but all built around movement, mobility as the core strength.
Yes, and a system really designed to handle environmental risk. But then, the mid-19th century hits and colonial rule arrives, and suddenly everything starts to change dramatically.
Right. This is where we get into what the sources call the Great Squeeze. It seems the colonial government just wasn't interested in supporting these fluid ways of life. Their priorities were different.
Totally different. Look, their main aims were pretty straightforward. Collect more land revenue for the state and get raw materials produced for export back to England.
And how did that clash with the pastoralists?
Well, the easiest way they saw to boost revenue was to take those open grazing lands, which they basically saw as unproductive wasteland, and convert them into cultivated farms under direct taxation.
So less land for grazing straight away.
Immediately, the grazing grounds just started shrinking.
But
Rapidly.
it wasn't just about farming, was it? They used forestry laws too, reserved forests.
Absolutely. Huge areas were declared reserve forests. This wasn't about conservation in the way we think of it now. It was about controlling access to commercially valuable timber.
Like what kind of trees?
Strong hardwoods, things like deodar or sal, really valuable for building railways, ships, construction.
And the official thinking was that grazing was bad for these forests.
Yeah, they had this mistaken idea that grazing animals destroyed young saplings, stopping the big trees from growing. So pastoralists were often completely banned from huge forest areas that were actually crucial for their survival, especially during certain seasons or dry periods.
So first they control the land, then they start controlling the people themselves. There was a lot of suspicion towards nomadic groups, wasn't there?
Deep suspicion. Mobility was seen as inherently uncontrollable, potentially criminal. It didn't fit their model of a settled, taxable population.
And that led to specific laws.
It led directly to things like the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. This was a really harsh measure. It basically labeled entire communities as criminal by birth and forced them to live only in specific notified village settlements,
So they couldn't move freely anymore.
not without a permit. Their fundamental strategy for survival movement was criminalized. And on top of that, the economic pressure ramped up because the colonial government started imposing taxes, not just on land, but on the animals themselves.
Wait, they taxed each animal?
Every single animal that grazed. Imagine trying to run your livelihood when your main resource, mobility, is restricted or outlawed and your animals is taxed just for existing. It was crippling.
The consequences must have been just devastating. Taking away mobility basically breaks their whole system, doesn't it?
It completely undermines it. The immediate result was a severe shortage of available pastures. And because they couldn't move like they used to, the few areas they could access were grazed constantly, year after year.
Leading to overuse.
Exactly. Continuous overuse and the deterioration of those remaining grazing lands. It was a downward spiral. In fact, the Royal Commission on Agriculture noted this back in 1928. They found that pastoral breeders were finding it harder and harder to raise large, healthy herds.
Which meant less income.
Less income, poorer quality animals, and crucially, it pushed many into debt. They lost their economic independence.
And this kind of disruption, these borders and regulations, they didn't just vanish after Indian independence in 1947, did they? I'm thinking about the Raikas again.
That's a key point. The creation of the new international border between India and Pakistan in 1947 suddenly cut off the Raika herders from their traditional grazing grounds in Sindh.
Wow, an ancient route just severed by a new political line.
Exactly. And that tragedy, that idea of ancient movement being disrupted by modern boundaries and regulations, it wasn't unique to India. It was happening elsewhere too.
Which brings us to Africa.
It does. We have to see this as a global pattern. The restriction, the land confiscation.
Yeah.
We see a really chilling parallel in the story of the Maasai in East Africa.
The Maasai. They're one of the most well-known pastoral groups, right? Part of that huge number you mentioned earlier.
Yes, they are. A key part of the over 22 million Africans who depend on pastoralism. Their name itself, Maasai, comes from the word Ma, meaning my people.
And their story involves massive land loss, too. Starting when?
It really kicks off dramatically around 1885. That's when Matsaland, their traditional territory, was literally just sliced in half by an arbitrary international boundary drawn between British Kenya and German Tanganyika.
Just drawn on a map, cutting through their land.
Pretty much. And over the following decades, through various treaties and land grabs, the Maasai ended up losing something like 60% of their original pre-colonial lands. A huge amount.
And what happened to that land? Where did it go?
Large chunks were turned into farms for white settlers. And somewhat ironically, huge areas were also set aside as game reserves, famous ones, like the Serengeti National Park.
Reserves that excluded the Maasai and their cattle.
Exactly, which created this fundamental conflict because the Maasai had their own worldview about land use.
How so?
Traditionally, they believed that tilling the soil, plowing it for crop farming, was actually harmful, a kind of crime against nature, because it made the land unsuitable for grazing, which was its primary sacred purpose in their view.
So a complete clash with the colonial desire to cultivate and control.
A total clash. And the colonial powers, well, they tended to view pastoralists like the Maasai as, frankly, savage, dangerous, uncivilized.
And that prejudice justified controlling them.
It was used to justify all sorts of restrictions, forcing the Maasai into specific designated reserves, limiting their movements drastically. They couldn't move without permits. The police were even instructed to keep watch on them to stop them entering